Hi everyone, it's Courtney McCullough here from Ageless Writer Studios, and with Courtney's book club, the second one. And then of course, got my co-host, co-star, whatever, Salem. Yes, I know, she's adorable. So this time we are talking about the book Tell Me What Really Happened by Chelsea Sedoti. Sedoti? Sedoti. Anyway, she's missing. They were with her. Tell me what really happened. And it's kind of stylized to look kind of like a sound wave sort of thing. See yeah. So then the back, there are stories about the woods around Salvation Creek, about the people who have gone missing. Now their friend is one of them. It was all her idea. They would get away from their parents and spend the weekend camping down by Salvation Creek. The five of them would make s'mores, steal kisses, share secrets. But sometime around midnight, she vanished. Now the four friends who came back are under suspicion. And they each have a very different story to tell about what happened in the woods. What are they hiding? Who's lying? Dark truths must come to light if their friend is to be found, alive or dead. The clock is ticking. So, and this is different because it's told entirely through first-person police interviews. This repulsive UA mystery asks what really happened that night. And, like, it's stylized. So, kind of like so, for those of you who see it, there's different fonts. The first font is like the police asking what the police's question is. And then the second one and then a little bit down, it'll have one font that says the name of the character who's speaking, which is one of the four friends, and then his or her account of what happened in response to that question. And then each chapter is a different question and answer to that question. And, I mean, it's a good book. I enjoyed it. It kept me guessing. Well, it keeps you guessing, but there's also this hint of you think you know what's going on, but you really, really don't. So, I'm going to get into the characters first, okay? And what this trip kind of means for them, and then kind of go back and build on what's going on. Does that make sense? We'll see. So character one is Petra. Petra has her dad, her stepmom, and then her stepbrother, who she adores, and she considers him like her real brother. All the characters are under 18, or 18 and under. They have not finished their senior year of high school yet, so there's a lot of references to school. But Petra considers herself to be Maylee's best friend, which you'll find kind of funny, but also you'll discover that, like with many of us in our lives, we have someone that we consider our best friend who may not consider us their best friend. So Petra, her father is a police officer. He's a lieutenant. Her stepmom, we don't really know much about her stepmom, except for like little tidbits here and there, but even those tidbits don't really give us much. Her stepbrother is a character that we'll get to later. She's very proud of what her dad does, so she's not much for ACAB. You know, all cops are bastards. But she does see that there are some bad apples, but good grief, you shouldn't blame the entirety of the police force for them. Petra describes herself as being kind of is not being as pretty as Maylee. but she's still part of the popular crowd. Her hair's more mousy, and she's not as she didn't quite have the sparkle that Maylee did. She's a pretty tough girl. Practical for the most part. Because of her dad being a police officer and because of Salvation Creek and all the missing people's cases, she's trained to be an SAR, or to be part of an SAR, which is a search and rescue team, but only the junior part. So she's taken some survivalist classes, and she knows a good deal about camping. She loves camping. She knows the woods pretty well. And what she does, that's her kind of her thing. Her thing is also she's a little on the bossy side, or what people would call bossy, but others would call being a leader or taking charge. Which, considering the situation these kids find themselves in, not entirely a bad thing, because out of all of them, she is one of the ones with the most experience. And even she has her questions about things, but she loves following a plan. I really feel for Petra. She when she has a plan or something in her mind, it's supposed to be that way, and deviating is very difficult to do, especially if you're a planner. And I feel her. I feel Petra. Her stepbrother Nolan is a different story. He's a not so popular guy, and he essentially gets talked on this trip, despite the fact that he hates camping, because his stepdad very seriously takes the disappearances that happen around Salvation Creek and is like, you might want to go with Petra. Which, of course, Nolan's like, in his mind is thinking, we're only step siblings. Like, yeah, we've been in each other's lives for like a long time, but still. Which, I mean, he does kind of later on admit that he does consider her his sister. But also, at the beginning, he's kind of irritated about the whole having to go camping thing when he's not into it. And that's just Nolan. But he ends up coming up with a good reason to go, because he's really big on cryptid hunting. Yeah. He's mostly online, or most of his friends are online. He doesn't really have a good close group of friends in high school, because he very vehemently does believe in like Bigfoot and other cryptids, and he's never been shy about it. And it started from, and what he considers his first real encounter happened back when he was in the Boy Scouts. And yes, it was kind of embarrassing for him too, because people have been picking on him ever since, but it is what it is. And he's discussing on one of the discussion boards online for his cryptid hunting, cryptozoology pals, like, great, I'm going to the place where there's probably a Bigfoot, because most of the disappearances around Salvation Creek, he does attribute to Bigfoot. And they were like, no, dude, this is great. You're going to get to go. You're going to get to hunt. You'll get to find, like, you'll get to find stuff. So that kind of boosts him up. And he's like, oh my gosh, you might be right. I might get to go find a Bigfoot. And so he ends up taking, like, a camera, thermal imaging, stuff like that. Which kind of pisses off Petra, because she's over here thinking, I told you to pack necessities. We're not here to hunt your stupid Bigfoot. It is what it is. Then there is John. John is African American, and he which I normally wouldn't like. It's a big part of the plot because there is a sort of subplot-ish thing going on because John does not like the police. You can tell that very early on, and then you kind of find out it's because of an incident that happened the previous year that he doesn't trust them or like them or much of his town anymore. John is a very scholarly kid. He's doing everything he can to try to get scholarships. He's on student council. He's on debate. I think he does a sport, if I remember correctly. But he's like doing everything. He's Maylee's boyfriend, and he's dating Maylee. He's her boyfriend, and he's moved past the incident, sort of, or at the very least, he's trying to. We'll get back to the incident, and he gets talked into going because Maylee's like, oh, come on, don't you want to be alone with me? And you know how our parents are, and wouldn't you like some alone time? And he's over here going, yeah, fine. But then also, he does admit that he also wanted to go because he wanted to prove something to himself, like that he could survive in the woods for a night or two, that, you know, he could step outside his comfort zone. But you also kind of find out that his parents were like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But he did it. He went. And there's Maylee, which she's the one that goes missing. So everything we find out about Maylee is secondhand. Maylee is an interesting character. Everybody has like a different view of Maylee. One moment, let me. So from Petra, and this is going from chapter 1, which is, for our records, please state your full name and your relationship to Maylee Hayes. Petra, oh my god, you're seriously going to make me do this? Fine, my name is Petra Whitfield. That's Whitfield. Maylee Hayes is my best friend. Trust me when I say that no one knows Maylee better than I do. A pause. You want me to get into all that? Really? Pause. No, I don't mind. I just wonder if, there's a more efficient use of our time. But whatever, since it's so important to you. Maylee and I met on the first day of kindergarten, back when I was this raggedy ponytail mess. It was before my dad married Brenda, and he tried his hardest, but he wasn't exactly prepared to raise a little girl on his own. That morning, my class was waiting on the blacktop for our teacher to open the door. And of course, my dad walked me right up to the group and reminded me 12 times not to leave the premises with anyone but him. Then he triple-checked my list of emergency numbers. You know how he is. When he finally left, I saw Maylee for the first time. My eyes snapped right to her, and it was because of her hair. She had this slippery-looking gold hair pulled back into the neatest French braid I'd ever seen. And it stood out because that's how I wanted my hair. Anyway, Petra will also tell you that, Maylee was super popular. Everybody liked Maylee. She had a little bit of a chaotic side. She liked to stir up a little trouble because things would get boring otherwise. But that she was, smart and efficient but always, I say efficient at getting what she wanted. She was a live-in-the-moment kind of person, and it drives Petra crazy, because Petra likes to plan things out, and Maylee's more, we'll get there when we get there, Petra tells Maylee everything, and she kind of assumes that Maylee does the same. Of course, we kind of find out later on that that's not entirely true. Seldom is. But yeah. Petra really cared about Maylee. She still cares about Maylee. And throughout the story, she's like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we going out hunting for Maylee? Why are you asking me these stupid questions? She's out there alone. Nolan's not a fan of Maylee. Neither is his stepdad, which is Petra's dad, or his mom, because they can kind of see parts of Maylee that Petra refuses to see. Nolan kind of sees her more manipulative, bitchy side. And that's because she has a tendency of teasing Nolan and others to all kinds of things. Let's see. I'm flipping through. I really need to learn one day that I can, like, leave. I should notate things. But I'm dumb. So we'll see. Nolan, he's... Yeah, Nolan... Like... Anyway, Nolan's not a fan of Maylee's. John obviously cares about Maylee. And he doesn't like to think about the worst of her because he's seen the good in her. But after this trip, he kind of sees where the manipulation kind of happens. Maylee also wants to be a famous influencer. Her social media following's like up in the thousands range, but it's kind of stagnated, and she knows she needs to like pull numbers, right? But it is what it is, but she wants to become a famous influencer, so much so that she was even talking to people about skipping college and doing some traveling so she can have some traveling arcs going on for her social media. We'll get into that later. Point is, Maylee is kind of wants to be that it girl, and she is as far as their small town goes. But if she wants to be a famous, like, it girl, it's gonna take some doing. And our final character is Abigail, who I resonate with on more than one way. Abigail is she's tall, but she's mousy. She's kind of quiet, but when she does talk, she rambles. Mostly because she's nervous, and you know, when you're nervous and you just start rambling and things just kind of come out, and yeah. Abigail is also lesbian, which I always kind of feel for them. I should kind of add Maylee's bi, and you'll see why that comes up. Abigail is not considered popular. In fact, a lot of people distance themselves from her because of her father. Now, there's a lot of assumptions that her dad is like this right-wing, fascist kind of person because of the things on his, like, the signs on his truck, the way he talks. But Abigail vehemently defends her father. Like, he's just a libertarian. Yes, he believes in his Second Amendment rights, but he's not into any kind of government ever. In fact, he is even against marriage. He's against marriage at all because, one, his, not really ex-wife, because they can't get divorced because he can't find her. Abigail's mom left him. Like, they got married, and she left him. No divorce, just left. And he's been trying to hunt her down so he could get an actual divorce because all this paperwork is messing him up. And so he tells Abigail often, he's like, don't ever get married. Scam. It's a scam. To which, Abigail, that's kind of how Abigail came out to him. Which everybody has been fascinated about, her coming out. Because she's, not just, she's out. And he's like, just don't get married. I don't care what you do as long as they treat you right. But don't get married. It's a scam. Like, that's the only thing he really cares about. He loves his daughter. And I feel that because that's how a lot of my family is about me. I mean, yes, there are some who would rather ignore the obvious or pretend it's not there. But then there are those who are like, she's one of the gay ones. But anyway, what are you going to do? But not a lot of people are happy about, Abby's dad. They're not really happy about Abby because they feel like she's that kind of person too, and Abigail's not. And there's just a lot of misconception there. Which, again, I love books like this that have varying characters whose points of view you get to see, because you get to see all of these misconceptions they have with each other. You can see how they fit together, and you can be kind of like, wow, I can see how that got misconstrued. Or you can be like, maybe if y'all talked, you would understand a few more things. But then again, also, these characters are also teenagers, and teenagers are not really known for making the best decisions or being good at talking. Yeah. Which Abigail actually has some issues with John. And everybody assumes that it was because John's black. And it's not like that. Abigail's like, no, it's because my dad is friends with, what was that kid's name? It's back here. There was an incident, with John. And the other kid that was involved in the incident, his dad, or his mom, really thought it was all John's fault. And her dad is his mom was friends with Abigail's dad. Which is why Abigail was kind of weary of him, because of things the adults around her were discussing and believing. And it had nothing to do with the kids, again, which, I mean, for some people it probably did, but others. Hold up. Where did it go? It should be here. Okay, here it is. Andy. The kid's name was Andy. So John is uncomfortable this whole time with the interview because he's concerned that he's going to get blamed for Maylee disappearing. Because he got blamed until it came out for his friend Andy's crash. So here. Alright, this doesn't have anything to do with what happened last night, but I'll tell you my side of it. Last year, Andy Snyder, that's my best friend, and I went to a party. We both drank alcohol, and later Andy decided to drive home, and I got in the car with him. I knew he wasn't okay to drive, but I didn't try to stop him. Didn't even occur to me. My parents are cautious people, always warning me about bad things happening if I do this or that. But up until that night, the worst injury I had was a sprained ankle from a trampoline. My therapist says it's common for people to feel invincible if they've never been in a situation that proves otherwise. I guess that's why I got into the car with Andy. Part of me believed I was invincible, but I wasn't. Neither of us were. Andy, he smashed the car into a tree, which honestly might be the luckiest thing that's ever happened to us. I think all the time about how it could have been another car. What if we killed someone? How could we live with something like that? I got banged up in the crash, but nothing permanent. Andy, though. Sorry, it was about a year ago, but it's still hard to talk about. One minute we're flying down the road, laughing about something that had happened in physics class the day before, and the next there was a screeching metal and the smell of something burning, and my whole world turned upside down. Anyway, Andy got into a coma, and his mom, she was swearing up and down that John had been the one driving and had swapped places with Andy to take less blame. And she basically started this whole smear campaign against John until people from the party came forward and were like, no, we saw Andy driving. And 2, Andy woke up and was like, Mom, I was the one that was driving. And then she gives like this really half-assed apology to John. But the rest of the town from that point on just kind of looks at John like, Which unfortunately was also Abigail. Until she really got to know John. And then she was like, okay, so maybe not. At least until later. Because during the entirety of this, during the entirety of the story, 3 people are certain that Maylee is dead, which is basically everyone but Petra. But here's the thing. No one thinks Bigfoot killed Maylee. And Abigail thinks John killed Maylee. And John thinks there was a serial killer in the woods. Meanwhile, Petra thinks Maylee is still out there. And that we need to go find her, like, now. Like, do you know who my daddy is? We need to go find her. So, how did this camping trip come about? Maylee. Which everyone thought was weird because everyone will tell you that Maylee's not much for an actual forest. She's more of an urban jungle kind of girl, if you know what I'm saying. Maylee's not much for being in the woods. She doesn't like waking up early. She doesn't like bugs. And she doesn't like anywhere that doesn't have cell service. They mention it several times in the book. Again, I should... Ba-da-da-da-da. Yeah, how did the camping trip come about? So John, after going through his spiel of, look, I got a lawyer here. There's a reason. I'm only doing this because I care about Maylee and I want her found. Blah, blah, blah. Then he gets into, with that out of the way, the camping trip was Maylee's idea. I think she originally meant for us to go along, but Petra invited herself along. And the reason for that is he was convinced that that Maylee wanted to go to Salvation Creek to get a little barrel chicka wow wow, like to have sex, be teenagers. Do the do, because they both have parents that are constantly kind of checking in on them. Maylee as a mother Maylee has a single mom and a sister, and while they do very good, Maylee's mother's not exactly a fan of the whole social media influencer idea, and wants Maylee to get a real job. And then Nolan is asked the question. He's like, well, I never asked whose idea it was to go camping. I assumed it was Petra's. She's always trying to coordinate camping trips, even though she's the only one who likes them. Well, her and Ray, which that's her dad. Personally, I try to avoid the woods, especially the woods around Salvation Creek. I've got an entire file on that place. And then Abigail. And then, okay, so Abigail, you know how Petra tries to stay away from Abigail and her dad because they consider her dad like right-wing fascist. And Abigail's dad says Petra's dad's a cop. That's why my dad always told me to steer clear of her. He says not every cop is rotten, but enough are that you should avoid them all just to be safe. Like, oh my gosh, why did I say that to you? Can we pretend I didn't? Sometimes words fly out my mouth before I even realize it. It's actually super embarrassing. And hell, I'm sure you're not bad cops. I mean, you've both been nice to me so far, really. Honey bun, I swear. And then, of course, like, around this time, Petra is like, look, I know my dad is paranoid, but he's been on the force for 25 years, working his way up to the ranks of lieutenant. As you know, detectives. Of course he's paranoid. If most people saw the things he'd seen on the job, they would be too. No. Down. Psst, psst, psst. Salem. Why do you always do this? One moment, folks. It never fails, my friends. Cats. But I don't have to get comfortable again. And then, of course, Petra is talking about, I honestly found the whole situation weird. Maylee isn't really a camping person. She's not into early mornings or being anywhere she can't post regular status updates. She always says, oh, what's even the point of doing something if no one knows about it? So it's strange that she wanted to go camping, and even stranger that she wanted to do it in a place where our phones wouldn't work. I mean, yeah, I had a theory. Did I mention that I knew Maylee better than anyone? Let me put it this way. Maylee brought a 2-person tent on the camping trip, and she sure wasn't asking me to share with her. Both she and John have parents who are home all the time. See what I'm getting at? And I thought about telling her we didn't need to make a big production out of it. Like, she and John could go, and I'd cover for her if her mom called. But then I thought about the two of them alone at Salvation Creek, and look, they're not exactly wilderness experts. And I was thinking, oh God, they'll probably make camp on top of a cougar den or something. They basically need me there to prevent any disasters from happening. Which is sort of funny to think about now. Maybe funny isn't the right word. Anyway, I didn't realize Maylee was inviting Abigail Buckley. I didn't even realize she knew Abigail. If you would have asked me a week ago, I would have sworn they'd never spoken 2 words to each other. If I'd known Abigail was going to be there, I probably wouldn't have pushed so hard for Nolan to come. When I invited him, I was thinking about how awkward it would be, me sitting alone by a campfire while Maylee and John fooled around in their tent a few feet away. I was scrambling to find someone to keep me company. They also asked Petra about these scratches she's got on her cheek, which we will get into. As for Maylee not knowing Abigail, you find out from Abigail that they've known each other for a while, and that she was kind of surprised that Petra didn't know at least a little bit about her since she and Maylee were attached to the hip. Abigail and Maylee are exes. There was a secret thing going on. So, Maylee was going through all these games, which after they set up camp, like Truth or Dare, or Never Have I Ever, Truth and a Lie. And the rest of us were saying, no, 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 no. But then she mentioned Spin the Bottle, and Sean was like, no way am I playing Spin the Bottle with your ex. Bailey laughed, and for a second I laughed too, because it must have been a joke, right? Sean was saying that Bailey had what? Dated Nolan. If it was a joke, it wasn't really funny. Maybe John was drinking more than I realized. Which Abigail is immediately like, I stopped moving. I almost couldn't breathe. She told John. How could she have told John? And of course, even Nolan's like, yeah, I knew about Maylee and Abigail last year or year before. Can't remember. But a while back, I had to go to the nurse's office during PE. Had a migraine that prevented me from participating in class. Darn. Anyway, on my way there, I passed the two of them. They were in the stairwell nook and didn't notice me because they were, like, making out. I didn't think that much of it because, like, who cares who's hooking up with who? And he's like, why? Was it supposed to be a secret? And Abigail's like, Maylee was the one who wanted to keep our relationship secret, not me. I would tell everyone in the world, but I kept quiet like she wanted. I mostly kept quiet anyhow. I did tell my dad, but that's my dad, you know? I don't think it counts. Besides, it's not like I could have hid it from him. The day after Maylee and I kissed for the first time, he and I went fishing, and while we were out there, I couldn't stop smiling. Yeah. So Abigail is a real daddy's girl. She's also a survivalist. One moment. My co-star's back. But yeah, Abigail's dad's like majorly a survivalist dude. He prefers living off the grid. He doesn't want the government involved in anything. He even has a cabin in the woods for hunting. And that's all he does. Like, he hunts, and he doesn't hunt for sport like a lot of people do. He literally hunts for meat. That is it. They're not exactly wealthy. Abigail admits that they're pushing things, but that he's doing his best, and part of helping with keeping their bills low is he hunts for a lot of their meat during the winter, during deer season. And he's taught her everything he knows. But here's the thing. Where is it? They talk about guns, you know, gun safety, gun rights, because of, you know, everything. Especially in regards to, like, Abigail's dad, because Abigail's like, my dad's not like y'all think. And it's because he isn't, but she talks about, like, handguns and, like, rifle guns. Because people, yeah. Okay, it's not here. Or, it's here, but I can't find it. See, Abigail, one of my favorite quotes from her was she was talking to one of the cops, and she's like, my dad has this thing about handguns, about guns and hunting. He thinks everyone should have a rifle because everyone should be able to go and hunt for their food. No one should have a handgun because a handgun means you're hunting people. Or it's something to that effect. I really want to find it. I really want to find it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so the camping trip, they get there late. They get there to to their camp. I'll learn to talk one day, y'all. They get to the campsite, and it's kind of late for what Petra was wanting, and she's kind of furious, but she's shaking it off. They're setting up camp, and then they want to go for a walk in the woods before it gets dark, because the woods are supposed to be pretty. But Nolan's over here. He's kind of like, he's got his gear out, and they're like, "Oh Lord, what are you? Please tell me you're not." And he's like, "I'm hunting Bigfoot," and they're like, "Of course you are." Of course, Maylee kind of teases him about it, which he'll tell you real quick. He doesn't really care about Maylee's opinion. He doesn't care about Petra's opinion, because Petra's over here like secondhand embarrassed. And Abigail's actually kind of intrigued. She's like, I don't really believe in it, but it's kind of cool to watch. She's like, I'm just happy to be here. That's Abigail. She's just happy to be part of it. So they go along this trail, and they find a footprint. They find this footprint. And of course, Nolan makes this big deal about it, and Abigail's like, I mean, it could have been a footprint. And John starts thinking it could have been one too, secretly. And Maylee's like talking it up as well to the group. Like, oh no, what if? And Petra's just over here like, it's a hole. It is a hole. It is probably an animal track. You're all idiots. Anyway, they start going deeper into the woods because Nolan sees something on his thermal imaging, which of course John secretly freaks out about because he's thinking there's someone else in the woods with us, especially when Nolan insists that it's something on 2 legs, not 4. Meanwhile, Petra is arguing that it's probably a bear or something like that, and even Maylee's acting a little nervous. Acting being the key word. And Abigail's a little unsettled, but whatever. They find this cabin, and it looks abandoned. And of course, Nolan decides to break in, and Petra's arguing with him about it, but he does. They look around. Someone's been in there. They should probably leave. They do, but Nolan tries his best not to give Petra the satisfaction of being able to say, I told you so. Siblings. And they get back to camp, and they start eating hot dogs and things like that. Campfire food. But this is where Maylee starts coming undone. Or where we start seeing more of, I guess, the real Maylee. Alcohol's involved. Petra doesn't drink, so she's not drinking. John is pretending to drink. He says real quick to the officers that he took a beer, but he never really drank it because after the night with Andy, he never really trusted alcohol anymore. Abigail sipped a little bit because according to her, her and her dad drink. Her dad lets her drink here and there, but she doesn't do it often, so she just drinks a little. Nolan gets sloshed. And Maylee seems to be getting sloshed. And then they want to play truth or dare, spin the bottle. Everybody's vetoing it. Then it gets bad. There's a twig breaking in the woods or something, and Nolan starts talking about Bigfoot again. And Maylee comes unglued. And she becomes so cruel to him. And this is after she's been trying to get him drunk, Yeah, Petra's like, it's never a good thing when Maylee gets bored. She reminds me of the border collie my family had when I was little. Frey was a good dog, but she was too smart and had too much energy. If we didn't keep her entertained, she'd get bored. And when she got bored, she destroyed things. So John ends up leaving. And when he leaves, this is when Maylee's like mixing rum and coke, trying to do truth or dare, which is when Petra finds out more that there's more to the Abigail Maylee thing going on. And like throughout this whole trip, there's little things like Abigail and Maylee whispering, and it's like getting to her, and she's noticing that something's off with Maylee. But Abigail seems to be in on it, and it's driving her crazy because she's like, this is my best friend, and we don't really know you. And then all of a sudden she finds out that Maylee and Abigail used to date. When did this happen? Why wasn't she told? Which, of course, has the police being like, so you didn't know Maylee? And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything to Maylee. Anyway, and then Maylee starts a fight immediately with Abigail, first like being like, you just don't like John, Abigail, because you think your daddy and his mommy are, and Andy Snyder's mommy is right, because they're like all these right-wing extremists, and that John's a criminal, and, you know, he was driving and he wasn't, which of course Abigail is just like, you know, freaked out, like, what? Why are you being so mean to me all of a sudden? And then, of course, talks about Nolan, or Petra then talks about how Nolan was talking about how Maylee's, like, being a real bitch. And then, of course, Maylee starts going off on Nolan. When Maylee looked at Nolan, it looked like that. Or, have you ever seen a nature documentary where it shows the exact moment a predator locks onto its prey? When Maylee looked at Nolan, it was like that. She laughed and said, I don't know why. Are you so pathetic? And she just went off, taunting him about his Bigfoot crap, saying Nacro is a huge group of losers. She said, what are you going to do if you find Bigfoot, huh? You're so useless, you probably lay down and wait for it to kill you. Nolan tried to respond, but it was basically just garbled string of expletives. Maylee was like, let's face it, Nolan, you're just another basement-dwelling incel creep who lives in a fantasy because your reality is too pitiful to face. Which Nolan can't remember because he was so drunk. And Abigail goes, I don't think I've ever seen anyone be as cruel as Maylee was last night. It was sad and scary. I was furious at her. It feels weird to admit that now, after everything that's happened. Because even though Maylee was being awful, I don't know, it seems unfair to say so when she never got a chance to explain herself or apologize. And she would have, I'm sure of it. Last night she was just nervous and drunk, and I didn't know what she was doing. And then of course her and Petra get into it. And John comes out and he tries to kind of calm people down, like there's a calming thing down. And then a gunshot goes off. And everyone's looking at Maylee, who thinks it's funny and giggling because she's the one with the gun. Salem. She's the one with the gun. Why does Maylee have a gun? Simple. Petra brought it. Petra brought one of her dad's guns because she was like, look, we were going into a wooded area that is known to have like bears and stuff. I was just trying to keep everyone safe. I know how to use it. I did not think that Maylee would be going through my bag and taking the gun, because that's how Maylee got it. Maylee also apparently wasn't that drunk because she managed to undo all the safety features that Petra put on it and fired. And of course that freaked out everybody, and that caused her and John, Maylee and John, to have a serious argument, which is why Abigail started to think John has something to do with what happened with Maylee. After that, everything starts going downhill because everybody's upset and they're fuming, and they're like, you know what? Fuck it, we're going to call it a night. Nolan has his own bed, or has his own tent. John and Maylee take their tent, and Petra shares with Abigail. Even though Abigail, for some reason... Salem, what are you doing? Even though for some reason Abigail thought she was going to be sharing with Maylee, because apparently this whole trip she's been hinting that she thought there was something more going on with her and Maylee, that maybe they would rekindle. And how much of a loser she felt when she realized that wasn't going to happen. About midnight, Maylee disappears. So here's what the rundown is. Nolan swears up and down he was hearing Bigfoot, but he couldn't move because he was afraid to move. He heard the Bigfoot circling the campsite and making noises and everything, and he heard it. It was there, and he should have known that it was taking someone, but he couldn't do anything about it because he was too scared and drunk. According to John, he and Maylee were still kind of mad at each other, so he just rolled over and went to sleep. Thought he'd deal with her in the morning because he was just like, yeah, whatever. Abigail was upset, but she went just lay there because she thought Petra was asleep. Petra thought Abigail was asleep, but she was still awake too because she was still fuming about the fight she just had with Maylee about Nolan and the gun and everything else. To the point that she couldn't take it anymore, so she tells Abigail that she's going to the bathroom, she'll be back. But really she goes to John in Maylee's tent, and she's the one to discover that Maylee is no longer there. John's freaking out because he was like, she was just right there, I swear, we went to bed together. She's gone. So they wake up the camp, and Nolan's over here freaking out and swearing up and down it's the Bigfoot, and everybody's like, Nolan, shut up. But there are things from Nolan's story and the other stories that are making you think, maybe Bigfoot. But then, of course, you're also thinking, along with John, of maybe serial killer, because John was really freaking out, feeling like they were being watched and followed, but he was thinking being watched and followed by another human, whereas Nolan's thinking Bigfoot. Salem. Children. People. For children. Maybe she'll behave. Meanwhile, Petra's thinking that Maylee probably went to go to the bathroom and got turned around. Because, the woods look very different at night. So she sets a timer for like 10 minutes. Then 10 minutes, Maylee's not back. They're going to go look for her. 10 minutes pass. She and John... go into the woods to go find Maylee, with Abigail and Nolan staying behind in case Maylee shows up back at camp. Abigail is immediately worried. And after a little while of John and Petra being gone, tells Nolan that she's going to go try to help John and Petra, and that he needs to stay because he's the one who knows how to drive a stick. Which is odd, because Petra said something to the police earlier about her dad teaching her how to drive a stick. So she's playing. She's playing Nolan. But, wonder why. Why were she and Maylee so whispery? Anyway, so they went. Petra and John are ahead of the gang, ahead of Abigail, and they're looking in the woods, searching. And they keep hearing, twigs snatch, breaking and stuff. They're getting turned around. They're worried. Petra's calling Maylee's name, and John's over here like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Don't be yelling. Someone could hear you. And she's like, that's the point. If Maylee's out here wandering, she's going to need us to help guide her home. And John's over here like, what if there's someone in the woods? Oh, you mean like Nolan's Bigfoot? No, a serial killer. Because even before this trip, John was worried about a serial killer because he and Maylee watched a lot of scary horror movies that took place in the woods. Because, that's what you do. You psych yourself out before you go anywhere. Of course, it's this whole story is a little... Anyway. They end up splitting up because Petra thinks she knows where Maylee is. She thinks Maylee went back to the cabin that they found. And John's over here like, nope, I'm not going to no serial killer cabin. Fuck you. Fuck this whole thing. I'm going to wait right here and hope you come back. And if you don't come back within a certain amount of time, I'm going to go to the others and we're going to go to the police. Fine. Suit yourself. Petra goes to the cabin. And, well... Here we go. Da-da-da-da-da. Petra gets to the cabin, and she notices the lights are on. She goes in, and there's Maylee. Did Maylee offer an explanation for being at the cabin? If I tell you this next part, you better use it to help find Maylee's killer, okay? I'm doing my part, so do yours. Yes, Maylee's killer, they do end up finding Maylee's body. Spoiler. This whole thing's a spoiler. I'm going to have a thing down in the description. You're all going to know. But yeah. They do find Maylee's body. She's stuffed in to a tight wedged area. But she has a gunshot wound as well as being wet. But I'll get into that later. Maylee let me into the cabin. She had a blue beanie pulled over her hair and a flannel blanket wrapped around her shoulders. In the light of the camping lantern, she looked like a freaking LL Bean ad or something. Skipping around. While I worked, Maylee plopped down on the cot and was like, "You're not supposed to be here." And I was like, "Excuse me, I'm not supposed to be here? Maybe let's talk about what you're doing here." She was like, "It's kind of a funny story." I told her, I bet it really wasn't. Whose cabin is this? I don't know. Some hunter. Except, they do know whose cabin it is. Remember what I said about Abigail's dad being a hunter? Ding, ding, ding. And of course, Maylee, who used to date Abigail, knows that this is Abigail's dad's cabin. Anyway, basically, when Petra confronts Maylee, Maylee tries to be like, "I just needed time to myself, trying to find myself." But then Petra keeps pushing, and eventually she's like, "My media influencer career will go sky high." Think about it, Petra. The girl who disappeared from Salvation Creek back alive within a week. I mean, I'll be a superstar. And Petra's like, "Oh my gosh, you're awful." And of course, Maylee keeps trying to get Petra to help because Petra is the perfect person to help with this because she knows what someone who's been in the woods for about a week would look like and act like and have done to them, to make it believable. And Petra's like, "I'm not helping you. I'm leaving this cabin and I'm telling everyone," which starts a fight, which is how Petra gets scratches on her face from Maylee. She runs out the cabin. And when she runs out the cabin, what she doesn't realize is that Maylee is chasing her. But Maylee ends up losing her. Or she ends up losing Maylee. And then she can't find John because John has decided to try to go back to the others. It's at this point that there's another gunshot. And the kids manage to find each other and get back to the cabin. And immediately, they don't or not to the cabin, but to the campsite. They don't pack up or anything. They just immediately go to the car and they leave, and they get to the police. And that's when the story comes by. Because it's a story in media res, or in the middle. But each kid, except Petra, when they leave, thinks that Maylee is alive. Because last time Petra saw Maylee, she was probably headed back to the cabin after she realized she couldn't catch up to Petra. Because Petra was wearing the appropriate clothes to go hiking in the woods and was able to get away, whereas Maylee, not so much. So what happened with the others? Abigail has known about Maylee's plan for a while. Apparently, they ended up reconnecting after their breakup. And it was kind of in a manipulative way because Maylee wanted to have Abigail's help in doing her big disappearing act. Abigail was involved. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. You know? Okay, so what exactly was Maylee's plan, Abigail? I'll tell you everything because I guess I have to. I told Maylee I wouldn't ever talk about this with anyone. She made me promise. She said, Abigail, if we're going to do this, it needs to be a secret forever. Even like 50 years from now. I mean, it feels wrong to break a promise to Maylee, even if she's dead. Maybe especially since she's dead. That's why I didn't tell you this part right away. And knowing the whole truth couldn't help you save her, so I guess I hoped it'd be okay to keep it a secret. Actually, I'm still not being honest. I didn't only hide this part of the story from Maylee, I did it for myself too. You know how sometimes when you say something out loud, it makes you realize just how bad it is? But Aunt Abby says we have to face our wrongs to be right with ourselves, so here's the truth. What Maylee and I did, it was awful. And then so they talked about the cabin. Abigail and Maylee patched things up, or seemed to. They're not dating anymore because, Maylee's with Dawn. But they're talking, they're hanging out. And Maylee keeps bringing up the cabin because apparently that's where she and Abigail would hook up. And Abigail was like, whatever. And she knew about Maylee's career aspirations to be famous. And she also brought up how, and of course there's also, Maylee talking about how you have to be kind of it's expensive to be an influencer because you have to have the right clothes and this and that. And Abigail's like, why not just get a job? Which of course Maylee's like, excusez-moi? A job? No. Which is how this happens. Maylee basically convinces Abigail that her mom is abusing her, and that she has this great scheme to get away from her mother and from everything else. And Abigail agrees to help her with it. The scheme is basically fake a disappearance. And with the money that would be rounded up to try to help find her, when she is found, she can use the money to fund the lifestyle she wants. And away from her mother. Even though her mother isn't really trying to control her, she's just like, social media influencing isn't quite the job you think it is. Please consider getting a real one and going to college. But she's really good at convincing Abigail, and Abigail is so in love with Bailey still, and she thinks that this might bring them back together romantically. So she goes along with it. That's what all that was about. Well, of course, she didn't expect Petra to find the cabin. She didn't expect Nolan to find the cabin, or the others to follow him and find it. She didn't expect, and she didn't even really know that Petra found Maylee after the whole campfire thing. But it was what it was. So what she was trying to do was beat John and Petra to Maylee to be like, hey, they're looking for you. You're going to want to hide, lay low. But instead she hears a gunshot. And when she hears the gunshot, that's when she runs into Nolan and John and Petra. And they realize they have to get out of there. John, this whole time, he thinks that there is a killer in the woods. I mean, there's the whole cabin thing. There's the feeling of being launched. The entirety of his storyline is he's pretty sure someone's out there with them, like some crazy hunter or whatever. And Petra at first was like, yeah, because serial killers wait in the woods for people to come to them all the time. But of course, after being in here, and then when she finally finds out that Maylee's dead, she's like, maybe John was right. There was a serial killer. We gotta go find, But the thing is, John he's like freaking out, So he ends up leaving the place where he was going to wait for Petra and starts making his way back. And that's when he hears the gunfire and he hears screaming and yelling and he runs, and then he runs smack into like where Nolan and Abigail are. And then Abigail starts yelling at him, saying he's got blood on his hands, and he doesn't. John has no blood on his hands. But Abigail swears there was. Abigail sincerely believed that John killed Maylee. Like, he found her and they fought over her scheme. Petra doesn't know what happened with Maylee. She thinks that she was running away from Maylee and left Maylee kind of stranded in the woods. That's how she got found and killed. So Nolan's alone at the campsite. And he's freaking out because he just let 3 very vulnerable teenagers go in to fight Bigfoot. He takes the gun and he goes into the woods to hunt Bigfoot and to save, or hopefully save, his sister and her friends. One moment. So here's the thing. John also, he did find Maylee, but when he found her, he thought she was dead. That's another reason he thought there was a serial killer in there. He did find her, and he thought she was dead. No, wait. Nolan. Or John. I am doing my best here. Everyone else would have ignored him. Here. Ready? I realized my mistake before we even got to the campsite. It's right when we passed the gas station with a Sasquatch crossing sign. You like scary movies? Well, I don't. This is John, by the way. Bailey loves them, though, so we watched tons together. I've seen gas stations like the one at Salvation Creek a million times. If we'd stopped there, some old white dude with missing teeth would have warned us if we went to the woods, we'd never come back again. Everyone else would have ignored him, just like they ignored the other disturbing stuff that piled up once we got to Salvation Creek. The footprint, the shack, the strange noises. We were getting hit with one bad omen after another, and nobody else was entertaining the possibility that someone, not Bigfoot, but a person was out there with us. And that's why I'm talking to you now. Maybe you'll still try to pin this on me, but I can't sit here and keep what I saw to myself. Because Maylee was murdered last night. Someone shot her straight through the heart and... Give me a second. I'm telling you everything, so please bear with me. I love Maylee, you know. Maybe I could have, and then, so skipping ahead a little bit, maybe I could have convinced myself if I'd been the only one experiencing anything. But all day, Maylee was hearing and seeing weird stuff, too. Even Nolan's Bigfoot evidence proved that someone, another human, was at Salvation Creek. It wasn't in my head. I could sit there all night and tell myself I was overreacting. But how did this account for Maylee and Nolan? Then I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Deep in the trees, there was a glow from a flashlight. No mistaking it. I wasn't alone. Something in me snapped, and I felt exposed. I felt like I was being hunted. So I ran. As I moved through the trees, I kept hearing noises nearby. Rustling sounds, footsteps, snapping twigs. I kept going. Not fast enough, though. Running through the woods isn't like running around the school track. Branches hit me in the face. My feet kept getting tangled in vines. And I knew I should be quiet, but I was panting so loud the whole forest could probably hear me. I dropped my flashlight somewhere. Couldn't remember when I last had it, and I could barely see. I stopped suddenly crashed nearly crashed into a tree. There's someone ahead of me in the woods. A few yards, maybe, far enough that I couldn't make the figure out well. Not in the dark. Then the person moved, and I saw a flash of blonde hair. It was Maylee. I found her. She was standing on her eyes, hunched over like she was... I'm not sure exactly. Looked like she was taking her shoes off, but I couldn't figure out why she'd be doing that. She hadn't heard me come up. Tried to call to her, but I was gasping for breath. Couldn't get sound to come out, so instead I started moving forward. I was so close when... Skipping a bit. I was standing right there. Right there. Oh, that's when I saw someone behind her. Another person sneaking through the trees. I froze. Felt like my whole body turned to stone. And I was standing right there, nearly close enough to reach out and grab Maylee, when the other person raised a gun and shot her. Maylee collapsed. I shouted. I fell to my knees next to her and pressed my hands to the bullet wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Her shirt was soaking wet. How bad she bled so much so fast, and I'm sorry, I don't know. Telling it to you feels like reliving it. I remember the smell of her blood, like rusty metal. I remember being surprised by how cold it was. I remember watching Maylee's chest rise and fall of breath, but she wasn't moving. Her hands were pale. I kept looking at them because I didn't want to look at the wound. I didn't want to look at her face because... Sorry. I couldn't look at her eyes. I couldn't bear to see her eyes without life in them. A branch snapped nearby, and I jerked back from Maylee. I thought the killer was coming for me, but he wasn't. He was moving away, toward the sound of a voice I'd only just noticed. It was Abigail calling out for us. The killer was heading right toward her. My first thought was, it was a relief. If I stayed where I was, maybe I could still get out of the situation alive. But then Abigail shouted again, "Hello, can anyone hear me?" She might as well shine a spotlight on herself. How could I leave her like that? Her or any of the others. They had no idea what they were up against. Had no way to protect themselves. I didn't get them fast. They didn't like Maylee. So I got to my feet. I swallowed my fear, and I left Maylee. So John was thinking, he had to save the others from this killer. But Nolan. And Petra, again, she's hearing commotion herself, and she's trying to get to the others. And this was after she had left Maylee because they fought, and then she ran thinking she was getting away from Maylee, but then she was going to go back to look for Maylee. Because she was like, I can't just leave her stranded in the woods. Even if she is being kind of a bitch. And of course, Abigail swears up and down that it was John who killed Maylee, but it wasn't. He didn't have blood on his hands like she thought because it was the water. But why was Maylee wet? We'll see, huh? Nolan, based on your previous statements, it's clear you left the campsite, right? I'm not big on wandering the woods alone in the middle of the fucking night, but guess what? I'm also not cool with sitting around like a sacrifice. The longer I'm alone, the more my paranoid animal brain starts to take over. Bigfoots are intelligent, you know. I'm not saying they have human levels of reasoning, but they're not bears or deer either. If one has been watching us all day, then it knows its best chance is to get us to separate. And me being alone at the campsite, I'm the easiest to pick off. Plus, I'm stressing about Petra running into the creature in the forest. Knowing her, she'd be so pissed a Bigfoot was interfering with her carefully coordinated schedule that she'd try to fight it. Something like that happens, Petra won't even realize how much danger she's in. I already screwed up bad, freezing while the Bigfoot took Maylee. In that moment, I was every awful thing she'd said about me. Useless, pathetic, coward. Kind of person who'd wait to die instead of taking action. I don't want to be that person, though. And I don't have to be. Right now, this moment, I can change. So I decided to go into the woods to save Petra and to save myself. I take a flashlight and my thermal imager, not because I'm still trying to gather data, but because I think it might help locate the others. Believe me, by that point, all my plans to document the Bigfoot are shot. I'm wrong to in the first place. I hadn't known what I was getting into. My goal is to find Petra and John and Abigail and convince them there's nothing we can do for Maylee. I'll drag them back to the campsite, get them in the car. We won't even pack our stuff, we'll just go. As soon as we are on the main highway, we can call the police. Let them find Maylee. Let them come in with tracking dogs and helicopters and enough noise and people that'll scare the Bigfoot off. All I need to do is find everyone and convince them this is the best strategy. That's it. So I leave the campsite, I walk down the hill and toward the creek. But Nolan also admits that he has the gun. He took it. He felt he had to take it. I'm doing this. Nolan, according to Abigail, a shot was fired after you found her in the woods last night. Can you cooperate? Abigail said that? No, she's wrong. The shot didn't come while we were together. I know because I fired the shot. I fired at the Bigfoot. Earlier, after the episode with Maylee shooting the gun, I somehow ended up with it. I stashed it in my tent to get it away from her. Then I kind of forgot about it. Until I go into the woods looking for everyone. I take it with me, just in case. When I'm out there, when I see the Bigfoot, I totally freeze up. I'm watching it devour Maylee's body. And look, this creature has to be 400 pounds. I know very well that Maylee's not exactly going to sustain it. Which means, guess who's going to be the main course? But I still don't move. And isn't that the exact useless response people would expect from me? Just standing there, waiting to be ripped apart. Too scared to even try to fight it because it's easier to lie down and die. I'm pathetic. Pathetic. Then I kind of snap out of it. I'm like, no, that's not the person I'm going to be. It's too late to help Maylee, but I can save myself and the others. Maybe I can scare the Bigfoot away from Maylee's body, because this sounds morbid, but I'm thinking the police could come later and recover whatever's left. Probably your family would want something to bury. So I shoved my phone into my pocket, wrapped both hands around the gun like Ray taught me, and I fire once. Even in the dark, even though I'm wobbly, I hit the Bigfoot. I see the way it falls back. In case you're wondering, so see, Nolan, when he was in the woods, could have swore he saw Bigfoot, and that it was eating on Maylee. He heard the slooshing sounds of someone being eaten. So he fired. Of course, when John finds Maylee, she's got a gunshot wound. Or she's been shot, and she's wet from from water. And she's taking off her shoes. The last time Petra saw her was in the woods when she was running from her because of the fight they were having. Abigail was trying to find Maylee before the others did to give her a warning. What happened that night becomes clear when you remember a few things. That Petra tells people, or tried to tell people with Nolan, or especially tried to tell Nolan when he was trying to prove the existence of Bigfoot. See, a lot of the people who went missing in Salvation Creek were found wedged in places, and typically nude. But they weren't eaten off of or anything. And he thought that was some weird thing the Bigfoots did. Petra explained that sometimes people get hypothermia. And once you get hypothermia, for whatever reason, you tend to strip and get into a little wedge space to get warm. When in reality, you're killing yourself faster. The police kind of have all the information they need. And it looks like that after, and from what they're talking to with the kids and how things are put together, it goes as follows. Maylee and Petra had their fight in the cabin, and it went out into the woods where Maylee tried to chase Petra, and Petra was trying to run away from Maylee. Maylee got lost and probably slipped and fell into the creek that was nearby. Managed to get herself out. Because the woods are really cold at night, she probably started to feel cold and trying to get off her wet clothes, which was the slooshing sound that Nolan heard when he fired. John probably ran up on Maylee right at the wrong time, and the person he saw was probably Nolan. And of course, they say Maylee was still alive after the shot because it didn't hit her heart. It hit her in the shoulder. But because everybody ran and she couldn't get words out, she walked and continued to try to strip off her wet, cold clothes. But then they found her wedged. Yeah. Anyway, everybody was hysterical. Earlier you said Maylee's body was shoved between rocks or something. What was it, 5 miles from where I saw the Bigfoot killer? But I don't know. They do finally put it together. Petra, hypothermia, hide and die. For Nolan, the entire time when they're explaining to him what happened, he's like, no, I killed Bigfoot. It was Bigfoot. And of course, Abigail's like, oh my gosh, I owe John this huge apology. I am so sorry. She goes, I thought it was him. She owes Petra kind of an apology too, because Petra's like, and Petra, it's awful what happened. But of course, I mean, this whole thing proves another point about gun control, I guess. You know, be careful with your weapons, because teenagers in the woods are not a good combination. Salem! Oh, Lord. What are you doing? No. Sit. Stay. Don't look at me like that. It was supposed to be a cute little camping trip in the woods, you know? Little ha-has, little fun. Instead it turned into a night of hysterics and fear. One person thinking there was a serial killer, one person thinking there's a Bigfoot, one person thinking that there's a killer in the group, and another person upset that their friend is lost in the woods. 4 completely different stories going on at once. From the same evidence, from their same perspectives. But it all leads back to Maylee. And far be it from me to speak ill of the dead, even the fictional dead. But this could have all been avoided if this girl could have just been like, you know what, I'm not that special. I can do a real job. I know that's rich. Coming from, well, I'm a caregiver, and that's a real job. My grandmother needs me. But anyway, it shows what imaginations can do. It shows what the woods can do to your thought, to your brain. How being in unfamiliar environments can mess with you. Or even in Petra and Abigail's case, even places that you kind of know can mess with you when you have other ideas going on up there. Maylee wanted so bad to be this superstar. She wanted to go famous for going missing and being found. But instead, she's going to have to go famous for being a victim of Salvation Creek. Well, in her own hubris, I suppose. Or would it be greed? Anyway, I thought it was an interesting read. And I want to read more from Chelsea Sedoti. And, I'm really hoping that, I find more or can afford more, because if they're all as good as this one, mwah. And yes, I know I'm still kind of all over the place. This is only episode 2. I'm figuring things out. Maybe one day I will figure things out. The ending, there is an epilogue. And it's basically like what's going to happen with the kids next. Petra is making sure that Nolan's going to get help. Legal help and probably psychiatric help, because it's not good. Like Petra The epilogue is, you've been very helpful. We appreciate you answering our questions so honestly. We know how difficult this has been. Petra is like, my dad says that families of victims always want closure. He never knows how to tell them they won't get it. They might get resolution, but not closure. I guess I understand what he means now. And then Abigail is like, I keep thinking of how things could have happened different. Like, what if Petra hadn't looked for Maylee till morning? What if Nolan hadn't brought his thermal imager? What if I'd never agreed to Maylee's plan in the first place? It's like all these things had to line up exactly right. If one of them had changed, just one, Maylee wouldn't have ended up alone in the woods, cold and lost and bleeding. She must have been so scared. And then, of course, John's over here like, I guess the one comfort, if you can call it that, is that Maylee probably wasn't scared. She's the most fearless person I've ever met. Even if she knew she was about to... If she knew how much danger she was in, she would have faced it head on. She would have been courageous until the very end. And, of course, Petra... Back to Petra. I doubt Maylee realized she was going to die. Knowing her, she was stumbling through the forest with a freaking gunshot wound, thinking it would make a great story for her followers. She would have even considered how wrong things might go. Must be better that way, don't you think? Feeling certain to the very last second that you'll be saved. And then, of course, Nolan, he's still having a breakdown of there wasn't a Bigfoot, was there? There wasn't anything in the forest but us. Anyway, and then, of course, Petra immediately starts trying to defend Nolan, too. Like, keep in mind, Maylee got him drunk. She got him riled up about Bigfoot. She basically put a gun in his hands. She turned Nolan into a freaking weapon, okay? And you have 3 people who will testify to that. Plus, the gunshot wasn't fatal. You said that yourself, so if you're going to go for manslaughter... Oh, so like criminal negligence or something? Considering that he's a juvenile and this is his first offense, it'll probably be a misdemeanor charge. At your probation. You know, she's just like, eh. Oh, hold on. Cats, people. Cats. Okay, so... Then, of course, Petra also talks about what she's going to do for Maylee. Which is, she's going to do what Maylee asked her to. So, before all this started, before anything happened in the woods, before Maylee went missing, she told Petra that if anything was to happen to her, that there's a very specific photo she wanted her to use for her image on the TV. Well, just because the plan has technically changed, because Maylee is not missing, but deceased, Petra's still going to use the photo. She's like, look, I know what my friend did was wrong. I know Maylee was wrong. I know what she did was disgusting. But if she wanted to be a legend, I'm going to make her one. And people can hate read all they want about her. Gosh, I want to find more. I want to find more of these stories because of Chelsea Sedoti. Where did I get Sedoti? Oh, because the bottom part is author of The 100 Lies of Lizzie Lovett. And As You Wish. I think those would be good books. For my next read, going a little retro. Or vintage, or however, what have you. Class Trip by Bibi Faz Rice. I really hope I'm saying that name right. It's an Edgar Award nominee. The in crowd is hanging out with a killer. Trapped with no way out. Angie Parker used to be a nobody at Oak Ridge High. Then she shed a few pounds, her glasses, and her loser image. Now she's become part of the hottest clique at school. When spring break rolls around, Angie can't wait to go on a canoe trip with her new friends to isolated Shadow Island. But when one of the guys dies mysteriously, it looks like they're camping out with a murderer. After a storm destroys their canoes, the group discovers that they're trapped on Shadow Island. Angie and the others watch helplessly as, one by one, the kids in their group meet horrible deaths. Soon, only the murderer and the final victim will be left on Shadow Island. But will Angie survive that long? Anyway, be neat. I'm excited. So yeah. Courtney McCullough from Angel Cider Studios. This has been Courtney's book club, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I have, and maybe one day I'll get this a little more streamlined with my page turning. Maybe. We'll see. Bye!